The warm summer breeze carried the mixed aromas of grilled meat, sweet desserts, and fragrant spices through Seattle's famous night market. Staff Sergeant James Chen walked slowly between the rows of colorful stalls, taking in the peaceful atmosphere he had missed during his 3 tours in Afghanistan. After 15 months of combat deployment, the simple pleasure of being among ordinary people enjoying their evening felt almost surreal. At 32 years old, Chen didn't look like the elite combat instructor he was. Standing at 5 feet 10 inches with an athletic, but not overly muscular build, he could easily blend into any crowd. He wore simple civilian clothes, dark jeans, a gray t-shirt, and comfortable running shoes. The only hint of his military background was his alert posture and the way his eyes constantly scanned his surroundings, habits deeply ingrained from years of service. The night market was especially busy this evening. Families with excited children darted between food stalls, tourists took photos of the lantern-decorated streets, and local college students gathered around tables sharing giant bowls of noodles. The sounds of laughter, friendly conversations in different languages, and sizzling woks created a lively symphony that made Chen smile. This was exactly what he had fought to protect, ordinary people living their lives in peace. Chen stopped at a Vietnamese food stall run by an elderly man who reminded him of his own grandfather. The old vendor, Mr. Nguyen, according to the name tag on his apron, worked alongside his teenage granddaughter Sarah. They moved with practiced efficiency, preparing banh mi sandwiches and fresh spring rolls for a growing line of customers. "What would you recommend?" Chen asked politely, looking at the menu written in both Vietnamese and English. Mr. Nguyen's face lit up. "Ah, first time here? You must try our special banh mi, my wife's recipe from Hanoi. 50 years, same recipe." His English was accented but clear, and his pride in his food was obvious. While waiting for his order, Chen observed the crowd around him. His training made it automatic to note the positions of market security guards, 2 visible, one near the main entrance and another patrolling the central area, the locations of exit routes, and the general mood of the people around him. Not out of fear or paranoia, but simply because situational awareness had become second nature. Sarah handed him the banh mi, wrapped carefully in paper and still warm from the fresh-baked baguette. "Here you go, sir. Would you like some hot sauce with that?" Chen thanked her and found an empty spot at one of the communal tables. The first bite of the sandwich brought back memories of his childhood visits to his grandmother's house, where she would make similar Vietnamese-style sandwiches. The perfect balance of flavors: crispy bread, savory meat, pickled vegetables, and fresh herbs made him realize how much he had missed real food during his deployment. As he ate, Chen watched a street performer entertaining a group of children with magic tricks. The kids' amazed gasps and delighted laughter at each revealed card or disappearing coin reminded him why he had joined the military in the first place, to protect this kind of happiness, to ensure that families could enjoy simple pleasures without fear. The sun had fully set now, and the market's lanterns cast a warm glow over everything. The crowd had grown larger as more people arrived for dinner. Chen noticed more vendors opening their stalls, some selling crafts, others offering traditional desserts or bubble tea. The atmosphere remained cheerful and relaxed, with the kind of natural community feeling that made even strangers feel welcome. Finishing his meal, Chen decided to explore more of the market. He wanted to try the mango sticky rice he could smell from a nearby Thai stall and maybe pick up some fresh fruit to take home. After months of military rations and base cafeteria food, he planned to savor every bite of real, homemade cooking he could find. Little did he know that this peaceful evening was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would require him to call upon his military training in a way he never expected to need in this peaceful setting. The peaceful atmosphere of the night market changed when the loud rumble of motorcycle engines cut through the evening air. 3 large bikes pulled up at the market's entrance, the riders revving their engines unnecessarily. Chen noticed how parents instinctively pulled their children closer as the bikers dismounted and swaggered into the market. The 3 men stood out sharply against the family-friendly crowd. The leader, a tall man with a shaved head and a leather vest covered in patches, walked in front. Behind him came a shorter, muscular man with a red bandana and multiple skull tattoos on his arms. The third biker, wearing a dirty denim jacket and sporting a long beard, kept looking around as if searching for trouble. Chen watched as they made their way through the market, deliberately bumping into people without apologizing. The smell of alcohol followed them, and their loud voices carried clearly across the market. Several vendors quickly looked down, pretending to be busy with their work as the group passed by. "Hey, Tommy," the leader called out to the red bandana man, "looks like business is good tonight." He laughed, and the sound had no humor in it. "Time to collect our share, don't you think?" The three men began stopping at different stalls. Chen observed as they approached a young couple selling handmade jewelry. The bearded biker leaned over their display, pretending to look interested while knocking several pieces onto the ground. When the couple protested, the leader stepped forward and spoke quietly to them. Whatever he said made the color drain from their faces, and they quickly handed over some money. This pattern repeated at several stalls. Some vendors paid immediately, suggesting this wasn't the first time. Others tried to argue but quickly gave in when the bikers became more aggressive. The market security guards were nowhere to be seen, and Chen later learned they had been deliberately distracted by other gang members at the far end of the market. The situation grew tenser when the group reached Mr. Nguyen's Vietnamese food stall. The old man was busy serving customers, with Sarah helping at the register. The bikers pushed their way to the front of the line, ignoring the protests of waiting customers. "Evening, old-timer," the leader said, placing both hands on the counter and leaning forward. "Busy night, huh? That means good money." His voice carried a clear threat despite the casual words. Mr. Nguyen straightened his back, though his hands trembled slightly. "Please, we already paid protection money last week. You said that would cover the whole month." The biker with the red bandana laughed. "Inflation, old man. Prices go up. You know how it is." He reached over and grabbed a spring roll from a customer's plate, eating it messily. "Quality food like this, worth more protection." Sarah stepped forward, trying to shield her grandfather. "Please leave us alone. We'll call the police." The leader's face darkened. He knocked over a stack of takeout containers, sending them scattering across the ground. "Police? Did you hear that, boys? Little girl wants to call the police." He reached for the cash register. "Maybe we should take everything tonight. Teach them about respect." Mr. Nguyen moved to stop him, but the bearded biker grabbed the old man's arm roughly. Several customers backed away, some pulling out phones but unsure whether to risk calling for help. The atmosphere had become thick with fear and tension. Chen had seen enough. He stood up slowly from his table, his combat-trained mind already analyzing the situation. Three opponents, all bigger than him but showing signs of intoxication. The leader was clearly used to fighting, based on his stance, but the other two relied more on intimidation than skill. Multiple civilians in close proximity meant he needed to be careful about collateral damage. As he approached the stall, Chen kept his face neutral and his movements calm. He had handled far more dangerous situations in Afghanistan, but this was different. This wasn't a combat zone. These were criminals threatening innocent people in his own community. He needed to handle this carefully, but he also needed to make sure these men wouldn't come back to threaten anyone else. The evening was about to become very interesting indeed. Chen approached the Vietnamese food stall with measured steps, keeping his breathing steady and controlled. Years of combat training had taught him that staying calm was just as important as knowing how to fight. He stopped a few feet away from the bikers, close enough to intervene but far enough to maintain a safe distance. "Excuse me," Chen said in a clear, firm voice. "I think there's been a misunderstanding here." His words cut through the tension, causing all three bikers to turn and face him. The leader, still holding onto the cash register, raised an eyebrow at the interruption. "Walk away, buddy," the biker with the red bandana growled. "This is private business." He took a step toward Chen, trying to use his larger size as intimidation. Chen didn't move an inch. "Actually," Chen continued, his voice remaining calm, "this is a public market, and you're harassing these people." He gestured toward Mr. Nguyen and Sarah, who were watching with a mixture of fear and hope. "I'd like to pay for any damages to their property, and then you gentlemen can leave peacefully." The leader let out a short, harsh laugh. "Look at this guy, trying to be a hero." He moved away from the cash register and walked up to Chen, looking him up and down. "You'd have no idea who you're dealing with, do you?" Chen met his gaze steadily. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Three men who think intimidating elderly people and young girls makes them tough." His words carried no anger, just stated fact. "I'm giving you a chance to walk away with your dignity intact." The bearded biker, still holding Mr. Nguyen's arm, tightened his grip. "Boss, let me teach this guy a lesson." The old man winced in pain, and Sarah let out a small cry of protest. "Let him go," Chen said, his tone shifting slightly. A hint of command presence crept into his voice, the same tone he used when training new recruits or leading missions. "Now." Something in Chen's voice made the leader pause for a moment. Perhaps it was the complete lack of fear, or maybe it was the way Chen's feet had subtly shifted into a defensive stance. But the moment of hesitation passed quickly, replaced by anger at being challenged in front of his men. "You know what?" the leader snarled, cracking his knuckles. "I'm going to enjoy this." He turned to the gathering crowd of onlookers. "Everyone watch. This is what happens when people don't mind their own business." Chen remained perfectly still, his eyes taking in every detail. He noticed how the leader favored his right side slightly, suggesting he would lead with a left punch. The red bandana biker was already breathing heavily, the alcohol affecting his balance. The bearded one had finally released Mr. Nguyen to join his friends, but his movements were clumsy. "Last chance?" Chen offered quietly. "Walk away now, and we can forget this happened." He meant it too. Despite their behavior, he had no desire to hurt them if it could be avoided. The crowd had grown larger now, with people watching from a safe distance. Some had their phones out, recording the confrontation. Chen knew this might actually help. Video evidence would support his actions as self-defense if things escalated. Sarah had helped her grandfather move behind the counter, out of immediate danger. Chen could see her dialing on her phone, presumably calling the police. That was good. It meant he just needed to handle the situation for a few more minutes. "You must think you're really tough," the leader sneered, taking another step closer. "What are you, some kind of kung fu master?" His men laughed at the racist assumption, spreading out to flank Chen. Chen didn't bother responding to the taunt. His mind was already calculating angles and distances, planning his moves if they attacked. He had positioned himself so that any fight would move away from the food stall and the crowd, minimizing the risk to bystanders. The tension in the air was electric. Everyone could sense that violence was moments away. Chen remained absolutely still, his calmness a sharp contrast to the biker's aggressive movements. In his mind, he was already running through the combat scenarios he had practiced thousands of times. The leader raised his fist, and Chen knew the time for talking was over. Time seemed to slow down as the leader's fist hung in the air. Chen's combat-trained mind processed every detail of the scene around him. The scattered food containers on the ground could make the surface slippery. The growing crowd of onlookers had formed a rough circle, giving them about 15 feet of space. The night market's lanterns cast multiple shadows, which could be either helpful or confusing in a fight. "Before you do this," Chen said, his voice carrying clearly in the tense silence, "you should know something." He kept his hands loose at his sides, ready but not threatening. "I've spent the last 12 years teaching hand-to-hand combat to special forces. This isn't going to end well for you." The leader hesitated for just a moment, his raised fist wavering slightly. Something in Chen's tone made him pause. Perhaps the complete certainty in those quiet words, or maybe the way Chen stood so perfectly balanced and ready. "You hear this guy?" The leader turned to his friends, trying to laugh it off. "Special forces? Yeah, right. Probably learned some karate at the YMCA." But there was a note of uncertainty in his voice now. The biker with the red bandana wasn't as cautious. The alcohol in his system had eliminated any sense of warning. "Let's just mess him up, boss." He stepped forward aggressively, pushing past his leader. Chen sighed quietly. He had really hoped to avoid violence. "Last warning," he said, looking each man in the eye. "Walk away now. Go home. Sleep it off. Come back tomorrow and apologize to these people. That's your best option." Some of the watching crowd had backed up further, sensing the imminent violence. Others held their phones higher, making sure to record everything. Sarah had successfully gotten through to the police on her phone and was speaking quietly but urgently into it. The leader, perhaps feeling his authority challenged by Chen's calm confidence, made his decision. "Get him," he ordered his men, but even as he said it, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. Chen's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. To most observers, he looked the same, but any trained fighter would have recognized the subtle changes, the slight bend in his knees, the way his weight centered perfectly, the the focus in his eyes sharpening to laser intensity. "Your choice," Chen said quietly. "Remember that." His voice changed then, taking on the commanding tone he used in combat situations. "Everyone watching, please stay back. This will be over quickly." The red bandana biker lunged forward first, throwing a wild haymaker punch. Chen didn't move yet. The bearded one began circling to the left, trying to get behind him. The leader, still holding back slightly, watched to see what would happen. 3 seconds, Chen said, his voice now deadly serious. "That's how long you have to back off. After that, I will defend myself, and I will not be gentle." 1. The red bandana biker was now within striking distance. 2. The bearded one had almost reached Chen's blind spot. 3. The leader had finally committed, starting forward with both fists raised. Chen's warning had been fair, clear, and more than they deserved. He had given them every chance to walk away. Now, as the three men moved to attack, he felt the familiar calm of combat readiness settle over him. The crowd fell completely silent. The only sounds were the footsteps of the approaching bikers and the distant noise of traffic outside the market. The night air felt electric with tension. In that final moment before violence erupted, Chen thought of all his training, all the combat situations he had survived, all the young soldiers he had taught to defend themselves. He had never wanted to use those skills here, in this peaceful market, but sometimes he knew good men had to stand up to bullies. The red bandana biker's fist was now inches from Chen's face. The former soldier's muscles tensed, ready to show these three men exactly why picking on innocent people had been a very, very bad idea. The red bandana biker's punch sliced through empty air. Chen had shifted just 2 inches to the left, letting the wild haymaker pass harmlessly by his ear. In the same fluid motion, he grabbed the man's extended arm and used the biker's own momentum to pull him off balance. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion for the watching crowd. Chen's right hand shot out, striking a precise point on the biker's shoulder. The man's arm went instantly numb, and he stumbled forward with a surprised yelp. Before he could recover, Chen had already moved on to his next target. The bearded biker, seeing his friend's attack fail, charged forward with both arms spread wide, trying to grab Chen in a bear hug. It was exactly the wrong move. Chen dropped his center of gravity and stepped into the charge. His elbow found a pressure point in the man's solar plexus, while his other hand caught the biker's wrist in a joint lock. "Pressure points and joint manipulation," Chen said calmly, as if he were teaching a class. "Effective control without causing permanent damage." He demonstrated this by applying slight pressure to the bearded biker's wrist, causing the larger man to drop to his knees in pain. The leader, seeing both his men neutralized in seconds, hesitated for a split second. That moment of indecision cost him. Chen released the bearded biker with a slight push, sending him sprawling backwards, and turned to face the leader. "Still want to continue?" Chen asked quietly. His breathing hadn't even quickened. He stood relaxed but ready, hands open at his sides. The leader responded by pulling out a switchblade knife, its blade clicking open in the tense air. Several people in the crowd gasped. Chen's expression didn't change, but his eyes focused on the weapon. "That was a mistake," he said, his voice carrying a note of finality. What followed was a demonstration of military combat training at its finest. Chen's front kick struck the leader's wrist with surgical precision, sending the knife spinning away into the darkness. Before the biker could process what had happened, Chen had closed the distance between them. His hands moved in a blur, striking pressure points on the leader's arms and shoulders. The leader swung wildly with his now numbed arms, but Chen flowed around the clumsy attacks like water. A quick sweep took the biker's legs out from under him. As the man fell, Chen caught him, controlling his descent and pinning him face down on the ground with a textbook armbar. "Stay down," Chen commanded, applying just enough pressure to make his point clear. "It's over." The red bandana biker had regained some feeling in his arm and tried to get up for another attack. Chen, while still controlling the leader, spoke sharply. "Don't. You've already lost. Stay down and wait for the police." Something in his voice, the absolute authority, the clear experience with violence, finally got through to them. The bearded biker remained on his knees, massaging his wrist. The one in the red bandana sat back down, looking dazed. Their leader stopped struggling against the hold. The entire fight had lasted less than 30 seconds. Chen had neutralized 3 larger opponents without throwing a single punch or kick aimed to injure. There would be some bruises and sore muscles, but nothing more serious than that. Sirens could be heard approaching in the distance. The crowd, which had watched in stunned silence, burst into applause. Chen ignored it, maintaining his hold on the leader while scanning for any other threats. Mr. Nguyen and Sarah emerged from behind their counter, looking both relieved and amazed. Other vendors who had been victims of the bikers' extortion scheme began to step forward, ready to share their stories with the approaching police. Next time, Chen said quietly to the leader, who had finally stopped struggling completely, "Remember that appearances can be deceiving. Not everyone you try to bully will be an easy target." He adjusted his hold slightly, keeping it secure, but not painful. "And some of us have spent years learning how to deal with people like you." The night market's lanterns continued to cast their warm glow over the scene, and the smell of good food still filled the air. But something had changed. The atmosphere now carried a sense of justice served, of bullies getting exactly what they deserved. 2 police cars pulled up to the night market entrance, their blue and red lights flashing against the colorful lanterns. Officer Sarah Martinez, a veteran of the Seattle Police Department, was the first to approach the scene. She took in the unusual sight. 3 large bikers sitting or lying on the ground, a calm Asian man in civilian clothes keeping the leader pinned with professional skill, a crowd of people with phones raised, obviously recording everything. "I'm a staff sergeant with the U.S. Army," Chen said clearly as the officers approached, keeping his hold steady but non-aggressive. "These men were attempting to extort money from vendors and attacked when I intervened. Multiple witnesses and video evidence are available." Officer Martinez nodded, appreciating his clear, professional report. "We can take it from here, Sergeant." She and her partner quickly handcuffed the 3 bikers, who had apparently lost all desire to resist. The leader winced as he was helped to his feet, his shoulders still tingling from Chen's pressure point strikes. More police officers arrived and began taking statements from witnesses. The crowd was eager to share what they had seen, many offering to send their video recordings as evidence. Mr. Nguyen and Sarah were among the first to give their accounts, describing not just tonight's events but the previous weeks of harassment and extortion. "They came every week," Mr. Nguyen explained, his voice stronger now that the danger had passed. "Always demanding money, threatening to break our equipment if we didn't pay. Many vendors were afraid to report them." Other vendors stepped forward with similar stories. A young couple selling jewelry described how the gang had stolen their earnings multiple times. An elderly woman who sold homemade dumplings tearfully explained how they had threatened her grandchildren. One by one, the victims found the courage to speak up. Chen stayed to give his statement, carefully explaining how he had given the men multiple chances to leave peacefully before defending himself with minimal force. Officer Martinez was particularly interested in his military background. 12 years active duty, Chen explained. "Currently serving as a hand-to-hand combat instructor at Fort Lewis. All the techniques I used were standard military control methods, designed to subdue without causing serious injury." The local news had gotten wind of the incident, and a reporter arrived with a camera crew. Chen politely declined to be interviewed, preferring to stay in the background. Instead, the reporter spoke with Mr. Nguyen and other vendors, who were more than happy to describe how the quiet soldier had stood up to their tormentors. As the police processed the scene, Sarah approached Chen with a fresh banh mi sandwich. "On the house," she insisted, her eyes bright with gratitude. "You have no idea how long these men have been terrorizing our market. Nobody else ever stood up to them." Mr. Nguyen joined his granddaughter, clasping Chen's hand in both of his. "Thank you," the old man said simply. "Not just for tonight, but for your service to our country. Men like you make America great." Chen accepted their thanks modestly, trying to downplay his role. "Anyone would have done the same," he said, but Mr. Nguyen shook his head firmly. "No, not anyone," the old vendor corrected him. "It takes a special kind of courage to stand up to bullies, to risk yourself for strangers." Officer Martinez returned with some news that made the gathering crowd murmur with approval. "We've run their ID days," she announced. "All 3 have outstanding warrants for similar extortion schemes in other neighborhoods. They won't be bothering anyone for quite a while." The night market slowly began to return to normal. Vendors reopened their stalls, customers returned to buying food and browsing goods, and the festive atmosphere gradually recovered. But there was a new feeling in the air, one of community strength and solidarity. Chen finished giving his statement and prepared to leave, but not before several vendors pressed food and small gifts into his hands. "Please come back," Sarah called after him. "You'll always be welcome here." As he walked toward the exit, Chen heard snippets of excited conversation from the crowd. Parents were telling their children about standing up to bullies, vendors were sharing their relief at being free from harassment, and several young men were discussing self-defense classes. Sometimes, he realized, it only took one person standing up to change an entire community. The next morning, Detective Lisa Wang sat at her desk reviewing the evidence from the night market incident. The case had quickly grown beyond a simple assault. As she spread out the files, a clear pattern emerged of organized criminal activity that had been terrorizing local businesses for months. "You're going to want to see this," she called to her partner, Detective Mike Rodriguez. "Those 3 bikers Chen took down, they're just the tip of the iceberg." She pointed to a map showing similar extortion reports across Seattle's International District. "They're part of a larger gang that's been targeting immigrant-owned businesses." The videos from the night market incident had gone viral overnight. Cell phone footage showed Chen's precise, controlled takedown of the 3 attackers from multiple angles. Comments praised his restraint and professionalism, with many noting how he had given the men several chances to walk away peacefully. At the police station, the 3 bikers were not handling their situation well. The leader, now identified as Frank "Tank" Thompson, had a long criminal record. Facing multiple charges of extortion, assault, and organized criminal activity, he finally broke under questioning. "You don't understand," Thompson told the detectives, his tough guy facade cracking. "We're just the collectors. There are bigger players involved." He went on to reveal names, dates, and locations, hoping to cut a deal for himself. Meanwhile, at Fort Lewis, Chen's commanding officer, Colonel Roberts, called him into his office. Chen entered, wondering if his involvement in the incident would cause problems. "At ease, Sergeant," Colonel Roberts said, gesturing to a chair. "I've seen the reports from last night. Clean takedown, minimal force, no serious injuries. Textbook application of your training." He smiled slightly. "Though I doubt you expected to use those skills at a night market." "No, sir," Chen replied. "I just couldn't stand by and watch them hurt innocent people." The colonel nodded approvingly. "Your actions have had quite an impact. The police are using your incident to crack open a major criminal operation. Plus," he tapped a paper on his desk, "we've received several requests from local business associations. They want to know if we consider providing self-defense workshops for their communities." Back at the night market, the atmosphere had completely changed. Vendors who had been afraid to speak up before were now sharing information with police about other criminals who had threatened them. The market security team had been replaced with a more professional service, and new cameras were being installed to improve safety. Mr. Nguyen's food stall had become something of a local attraction. People came not just for his excellent banh mi, but to hear first-hand accounts of how the quiet soldier had stood up to the bikers. Sarah had put up a small sign that read, "Home of the best banh mi and bravest customers in Seattle." Local news stations ran features about the incident, focusing on how one person's courage had inspired an entire community to stand up against intimidation. They interviewed other vendors who had been victims of the extortion scheme. "We were all afraid," explained Mrs. Kim, who ran a Korean dessert stall. "But after seeing that soldiers stand up to them, we realized we don't have to live in fear. When good people stand together, the bullies cannot win." The police investigation expanded rapidly. Detective Wang's team uncovered connections to other criminal operations across the city. Search warrants were executed, more arrests were made, and gradually, the network of extortion that had plagued the International District began to crumble. Chen returned to his regular duties at Fort Lewis, teaching combat techniques to new recruits. He used the night market incident as a teaching example, emphasizing the importance of restraint and giving opponents the chance to back down peacefully. "Combat skills aren't about proving how tough you are," he told his students. "They're about protecting people who can't protect themselves, and sometimes just showing that you're ready to stand up to bullies is enough to make them think twice." The incident had started a chain reaction that would continue to grow. Other communities, inspired by what happened at the night market, began organizing their own neighborhood watch programs. Local martial arts schools offered special classes for small business owners. The culture of fear that had allowed criminals to exploit vulnerable communities was being replaced by one of solidarity and mutual support. 6 months after the incident at the night market, the neighborhood had transformed in ways nobody could have predicted. On a warm Friday evening, Chen walked through the now thriving market, noticing all the positive changes that had taken place since that fateful night. The market had grown significantly, with new vendors joining every month. String lights now crisscrossed overhead, creating a magical atmosphere in the evening sky. A small stage had been set up where local musicians performed, adding live music to the mix of delicious food smells and happy chatter. As Chen approached Mr. Nguyen's food stall, now expanded with a proper seating area, he saw the old man teaching a group of young vendors how to make traditional Vietnamese coffee. Sarah, now attending college part-time, was managing the busy counter with confidence. "Sergeant Chen," Mr. Nguyen called out warmly. "Come, come, you must try our new special." The old man's English had improved, partly because he was no longer afraid to practice with customers. His stall had become so popular that he had hired 2 additional helpers to keep up with demand. Chen sat at what had become his regular table, watching the bustling scene around him. The night market had become a model for other communities. A local newspaper article, framed on the market's entrance, called it Seattle's safest street food paradise. Detective Wong, who still stopped by regularly for dinner, joined him with her bowl of noodles. "Remember those 3 bikers you took down?" she asked, mixing her food. "The trial finished yesterday. With all the evidence and witness testimonies, they're going away for a long time. More importantly, their confessions helped us shut down 2 other criminal operations in the city." The impact of that night had rippled far beyond just stopping 3 criminals. The market now had a volunteer security team made up of local veterans and martial arts instructors. Chen had helped train them in basic observation and de-escalation techniques. They rarely had to intervene. Their presence alone deterred most troublemakers. Sarah brought over Chen's order, the same banh mi he had been eating the night of the incident, though now it was officially named the Sergeant's Special on the menu. She pulled up a chair to chat during her break. "You know what's really amazing?" she said, gesturing around the market. "It's not just that we're safer now. It's how everyone looks out for each other. Last week, when Mrs. Kim was sick, all the vendors took turns helping run her stall so she wouldn't lose business." Chen nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The market had become more than just a place to buy food. It was a true community. Vendors shared supplies when someone ran short, helped each other set up and close down, and celebrated each other's successes. The stage area came alive as a local Vietnamese youth group began their weekly traditional dance performance. Customers and vendors alike paused to watch, applauding enthusiastically. Chen noticed how many of the young performers came from vendor families who had once been too afraid to draw any attention to themselves. "We're starting free self-defense classes next month," Sarah mentioned proudly. "Grandfather's idea. He said everyone should know how to protect themselves and others." She grinned. "He's been practicing the moves you taught him. Says he's too old to fight, but not too old to be strong." As the evening went on, Chen saw familiar faces everywhere. The jewelry-selling couple who had been among the first victims of the bikers now had 2 successful stalls. The elderly dumpling maker had her grandchildren helping openly in her stall, no longer afraid for their safety. New visitors mixed with regular customers, creating a vibrant atmosphere of community and celebration. Before leaving, Chen stopped to thank Mr. Nguyen for dinner, but the old man waved him off. "No, no, thank you," he insisted. "Not just for that night. For showing us that one person standing up can change everything." He gestured at the thriving market around them. Look what grew from that moment. Walking home under the string lights, Chen reflected on how a simple decision to step up had created such positive change. The night market had become a symbol of community strength, proving that when good people stand together, positive change can last far beyond a single moment of courage.